The emptiness, the hopelessness, the fear, the paranoia. Snowbound horror films seem to capture a fundamental truth about humanity better than any other. To survive the cold, we enclose ourselves in cramped places, bringing on the condition known as cabin fever, a state of heightened irritability and listlessness from long-term confinement indoors. It will not just be the brutal elements threatening your life. The boundless isolation will wear you down, stretching your sanity thin. If a magic bullet, an escape from your suffering, did come along, would you be ready to accept it, no matter what it was or where it came from? Human beings are social animals. There is nothing more detrimental to our well-being than lack of interaction. According to a 2020 Oxford study, some effects of long-term social isolation may include feelings of being out of touch, increased drug use, obesity, depression, suicidality, heart disease, Alzheimer's, and stroke. It is our social existence, or lack thereof, that will ultimately decide the outcome of our lives. We cannot always choose who we are exposed to, but at some point down the line, we should be able to choose who we let in, lest we pursue a relationship out of desperation, or withdraw entirely and become like feral children raised by wolves. In the 2008 film, Let the Right One In, a 12-year-old boy is bullied at school, has little to no friends, and lives with his mother, who is rarely present. With few options left, he must figure out a way to overcome his isolation before it's too late. In the 1960 film, Eyes Without a Face, a teenage girl is tragically disfigured after a car accident. When her father fakes her death, she is forced to confine herself in her bedroom on the top floor of his mansion in the country. She is physically removed from society, her fiance, Jacques, and hides her horrific scars with a featureless mask. Made decades apart, the two films draw dramatic parallels, both dealing with the effects of isolation and the need to have control over our lives, daring to shine a light into perhaps the darkest corners of the human psyche. What might you be willing to allow in when you are vulnerable and alone? To what dark depths would you sink to ease pain, find salvation or hope, an illusory glimmer of light to guide you out of hell? What is considered to be objectively good? Is it something that is entirely circumstantial? If you are not being constantly surrounded by good things, then is your life good? Imagine that you live every hour of every day inside a house. In this house, there are no people, no faces to connect with, no one to know you or validate you. Additionally, no furniture, no family photos, carpets, dishes, bookshelves, or clothes. As it is, it's not exactly considered to be a good home suitable for a person. But why is that? It would shelter us from the elements, keep us warm and alive. Is that not enough? What's the first thing you'd put in the space to make it instantly livable? Do trinkets, pieces of furniture, or photo albums confirm one's existence, prove that we're alive? Or can someone truly exist with nothing around them at all? The Oxford study, Solitary Confinement, Effects, Practices, and Pathways Towards Reform, documented the physiological and mental effects the punishment has on inmates worldwide. The study indicates that solitary confinement, which refers to a prisoner being held in a cell alone for 22 to 24 hours every day, has been in use since the 18th century and was popularized in the late 19th century with the rise of modern penitentiaries. While initially considered more humane than death, the ethics of the practice weren't debated until the 1950s, when it became apparent that prolonged social isolation was extremely detrimental to the mind and body of the prisoner. Around that time, the World Health Organization redefined health as a state of complete physical, mental, and social well-being, and not merely the absence of disease or infirmity. As it turns out, long-term social isolation and loneliness are more important than medical diagnoses like cancer and health behaviors in identifying individuals at higher risk of mortality. Louise Hockley states in Chapter 11 that social isolation, whether in the form of time out, detention, ostracism, or solitary confinement, is fundamentally a punishment. A person who endures social isolation, whether objective or subjective, for too long, encounters serious health risks. Social isolation can be determined objectively by quantifying the number of one's relationships, frequency of social contact, living arrangements, alone or with others, and degree of participation in social activities. Social isolation is also a subjective experience, which is referred to as loneliness, a perceived discrepancy between actual and desired social relationships, quantified by the degree of felt connectedness to others. In Let the Right One In, Oscar is subject to this perceived social isolation. Despite being surrounded by his peers almost every day, he feels lowly and disconnected. In Eyes Without a Face, Christian is subject to objective social isolation, as she is physically removed from the world, locked in her room 24 hours a day, a prisoner in solitary confinement. From another study conducted on older adults living alone, Hockley explains the hypothalamic pituitary adrenocortical, or HPA, stress system responsible for regulating cortisol, a hormone necessary to mobilize the body's energy resources, shows evidence of dysregulation. Increased levels of cortisol in the body leads to inflammatory diseases such as hypertension, cardiac diseases, stroke, and diabetes. Oscar is getting sick. His body, not just mind, requires some kind of social outlet. He needs to express his emotions. Instead, he withdraws even more, bottling himself up.
Ja, det stämmer. Räknar ut det nu?
Jag läser mycket så.
Hockley goes on to say, loneliness has been associated with higher levels of markers of systemic inflammation, including interleukin-6, fibrinogen, and C-reactive protein. Moreover, pro-inflammatory cytokines reach the brain and induce sickness behavior that includes social withdrawal and result in the self-perpetuation, if not exacerbation, of loneliness.
Vad duktig du var, grisen.
Perhaps the incessant bullying has subdued Oscar's self-esteem to the point that he feels unable to make friends. However, by always being alone, he is only perpetuating his own suffering. Christian's situation also increases her cortisol levels. Objective social isolation and loneliness are only moderately correlated. However, loneliness is strongly associated with objective social isolation in circumstances where one has limited choice in when and with whom to interact. Even though she sees her father and Louise, a former patient turned assistant, it is not enough to satisfy her human desire to socialize and connect. It was not her choice to only see two people for the rest of her life. She did not choose to be disfigured either. Like Oscar, she too suffers in silence, lacking an outlet, a way to alleviate her pain. There is, however, a difference between feeling like an outcast, or having no connection to other people, and having no identity, no expressions that others can mirror, and no means to emote in a way that is vital to a human relationship. While Christian would give anything to be in Oscar's position, he squanders his opportunities, leaving him just as frustrated. In the end, what does a human being really consist of, other than what can be portrayed to others, our hidden aspects that make up our true selves? Never being recognized, never validated, leaves us feeling starved, hollow, alone. When a person feels this way, they go to mental and physical extremes, especially if they do not know when the feeling will end. While both experiencing great amounts of loneliness themselves, Christian and Oscar are determined for change, but in freefall, haphazardly reaching out at anything that might break their never-ending plummet. Even if they manage to grab onto something, will they be able to find a foothold to rear them out of a pit of despair? Or will they slip and fall even deeper still? When a problem arises, how do you know what to do? In the long run, does it matter to you what solution manifests as long as the problem is resolved? As long as your life returns to being good? Did you make a mistake? Fix it however you can. Are you longing for a connection? Just talk to anyone. If you are lonely enough, and if any solution is compatible, then it won't matter who. In the empty house, an object might not be capable of confirming one's existence at all. The only thing that would make utter desolation livable then is the presence of just one other.
Skrik då! Skrik då!
When Oscar meets Ellie, the girl who just moved in next door, he cannot help being swept up by her vague intensity, despite her lack of interest toward him.
Jag kan inte bli vän med dig. Bara så du vet. Jag vill vara i fred.
Jag vill också vara i fred.
Gå hem då.
Gå hem själv, jag har bott här längre än du. Vill du låna dem? Tills imorgon.
Though the gap from his life to hers may be insurmountable, to feel a little less alone, will Oscar try to get closer?
Fryser du inte?
Nej,
Varför det?
jag har väl glömt hur man gör.
Ses imorgon då.
Is there more to her than meets the eye?
Une de nos méthodes consiste à détruire, au moyen de fortes radiations de rayons X, les anticorps qui font obstacle à l'hétérogreffe. Seulement ces radiations doivent pour cela être portées à une intensité telle que l'être humain n'y survit pas. On pratique alors l'exsanguination. On vide de son sang jusqu'à la dernière goutte le sujet irradié.
One night, the professor was driving his car with his daughter sitting in the passenger seat, mourning the loss of his wife. Intoxicated, the roads covered in ice, he crashes the car, leaving Christian horribly disfigured. Now utterly devastated by tragedy after tragedy, he leads a double life. On the surface, an upstanding medical professional and scholar on the cutting edge of medicine.
Cher professeur, votre exposé à lui seul était déjà revivifiant.
C'était passionnant, n'est-ce pas, Carl?
Passionnant.
Quel merveilleux avenir vous nous ouvrez.
In secret, a mad scientist that will stop at nothing to complete his vision. The professor has reached a point of no return. He believes that the best way to save her, and possibly himself as well, is to take an unsuspecting victim's face by force and attempt the impossible feat of grafting it onto his daughter, effectively giving her an entirely new identity.
Christiane, ton masque. Prends une fois pour toutes l'habitude de porter ce masque. Où l'as-tu caché?
L'habitude.
Maintenant, je voulais dire, prends l'habitude de le porter pendant le temps qui nous sépare de la réussite.
Je n'y crois plus.
indescribable softness. There is an indescribable softness. There is an indescribable softness. There is an indescribable. The snow silently falling in dust. The snow silently falling in dust. The snow silently falling. The hazy gloom before the night sets. The hazy gloom before the night. The comfort of a warm bed. The comfort of when all the worries of the day begin. All the worries of the day begin. All the worries of the day.
Hur gjorde du?
Jag vred. Luktar jag bättre?
J'étais seulement impatient de vous apprendre la bonne nouvelle. La chambre que vous cherchiez. Ça y est, je l'ai.
Pas possible. Comme je suis content.
Hur gammal är du?
12. Ungefär. Du då?
12 år, 8 månader och 9 dagar. Vadå 12 ungefär?
Ska du inte?
Nej, jag har lite att göra.
As Oscar's isolative tendencies at school grow worse by the day, so does the harassment.
Vad var det för papper du skrev på? Vadå papper? Få se. Nej. Vadå nej? Det är hit den.
After lying to his mother about what happened, he chooses to confide in Ellie instead.
Vad har hänt?
Några klasskompisar.
Du ska slå tillbaka.
Men om de...
Då hjälper jag dig. Jag kan det.
She has become a source of relief for him in the midst of his loneliness. It's much easier for him to talk to her than his parents. Despite the disconnect he feels due to their respective absences, he can't shut them out. He needs to tell them what's going on. Instead, Oscar is trying to handle everything on his own, giving into something he does not yet fully understand. If he cannot turn around his isolative behavior, then, like the professor, he might embark on a dark road, especially after the seed of retribution has been sown in his mind.
Jo, den där styrketräningen i badhuset. Kan man anmäla sig till den?
Man behöver inte anmäla sig, det är bara att komma klockan 7.
Ces chiens. Il y en a combien?
Vous voyez, vous serez bien gardés.
Whether it's contemplating revenge, being complicit to horrors, or committing the violent acts themselves, they are ready to try anything to put an end to their suffering. Will Oscar's plan to retaliate work out in the long run?
Ska de med pinnen till? Jag ska slå dig om du försöker.
Although she doubts him, all the hope Christian has left in returning to a normal life is in her father. She still wants him to save her, no matter what it takes. With a new victim in their clutches, the professor and Louise are about to attempt the impossible once again. Will their insidious enterprise ultimately result in the desired effect, the transformation of Christian into a new person?
Grisen plötsligt blir modig.
Or will they just open the door for further horror to eventually consume them? Does it matter what we do as long as our satisfaction is reached, especially when that is something we greatly lack? Does each decision we make derive from the standard of right and wrong and the chain of cause and effect that's fastened to the throne of pleasure and pain? Or are there other elements that can weigh on our decision-making, a sense of duty, a moral law?
What if you had the chance to hook yourself up to an experience machine? On the experience machine, you merely believe that you are spending time with loved ones, getting promotions, buying houses, having sex, and eating food. Although none of the experiences would be real, you wouldn't have any real friends or lovers, and would accomplish nothing. On this machine, you'd get just as much satisfaction as if it was all actually happening. If indeed all that matters are pleasure and pain, then it would be irrational not to hook yourself up.
Experience, the vehicle that wires reality, allows us the chance to feel, that drives our conscious existence forward. What are its properties exactly? Is it something that can be replicated perfectly by a machine? In life, does our consciousness just get filtered through a series of distortions interpreted to make sense to us by our brains? Or is it our consciousness that is filtering the experience exactly as it is? Meaning that, if we were to find ourselves trapped in one of these experience machines, there would still be a part of our waking mind that would not accept the nature of its reality. That there is a state of being somewhere within us that will always persist, despite what it is met with without. Able to feel anything, think any thought, believe any reality. Is this where we discover meaning? How our understanding of right and wrong impacts the world around us? When you commit an act, the culmination of past experiences and all the logical evidence available to you should point to the conclusion that the act will produce the best outcome and therefore be right. The consequences may turn out to be favorable in the beginning, but cascading through the course of future history could come negative long-term effects, side effects that you could not have possibly foreseen, causing the act to be wrong. Considering all of the uncertainty, how good things can come and go so quickly, leaving the bad things to take their place, it wouldn't matter what's right or wrong, good or bad. That would only matter if there was a way to know our actions counted for something, that they had to be good, or else we could not live the life we want. The German philosopher Immanuel Kant said that it is impossible to think of anything at all in the world, or indeed beyond it, that could be considered good without limitation, except a good will, stating that an action can only be right if its maxim, the principle behind it, is employed by the moral law, as in a universal common good, and a sense of duty in the one committing the act. He said that the moral law is the categorical imperative that acts on all people regardless of their interests or fears, and for an act to be permissible, it must benefit all without contradiction.
Bien. Qu'est-ce que tu imagines?
Je n'ai pas besoin d'imaginer. Je vois des choses horribles. Je les vis.
The monster is concealed in the dead of night. Do not attack when we are connected and content, while we awake and vigilant.
They creep up quietly to comfort us in our time of need, when we are asleep and unaware. Who is Ellie, really? Where did she come from? Is she someone that Oscar can trust? Trust, 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 trust.
Février. 20 février. Une semaine après la cicatrisation, quelques taches de pigmentation apparaissent. 20e jour. Les premières ulcérations se produisent accompagnées d'un décollement du derme et de signes d'infection. Le greffon nécrosé doit être retiré.
In the wake of this fresh failure, the professor has a chance to reach out, reconcile with a foothold, accept the insurmountable nature of his task, and put an end to the nightmare. However, he seems to be more motivated than ever. Christian now has lost all faith in her father's plight. Any hope she had in returning to a normal life has decayed away, like her stolen skin. Once the rotted flesh is removed, the professor and Louise make plans to procure the next victim. But what will yet another attempt yield this time? Yet another failure? Yet another wasted life? Or is this the one that will finally take? That will prove to themselves that their callous efforts have not been in vain?
Vous êtes folle.
Oui, je sais, les morts doivent se taire. Alors que je devienne morte pour de bon. Je n'en peux plus. Je n'en peux plus. Non plus.
Jacques, after believing he heard Christian over the phone, goes to the police station to learn they are already aware of a connection between the recent crop of missing blue-eyed girls.
Moi, docteur, je vous le répète, je ne travaille que sur des faits précis. Dans ces dossiers, j'en ai des témoignages. La vérité, je crois bien que, il me semble que... Des signalements vagues. Là, le taxi rouge qui a pris celle-ci. Là, la jolie femme au large collier de chien en perles qui accompagnait cette autre.
Having worked at the clinic at the professor's house for months, Jacques has seen Louise multiple times. With nothing more than the connection of the pearl choker, the police decide to insert a young woman in trouble for shoplifting to see if she ends up missing. Later that evening, while making the rounds, the professor stumbles upon the young woman, her hair dyed blonde. After all of his dogged efforts, here, delivered to him on his doorstep, the death of his longing. This woman, complaining of migraines, with perfect, slender features. The light bulb turns on in his mind. When the girl doesn't make it home, the police hurry over. Wasting no time, the operation already underway, the professor is forced to deal with them, leaving Christian anxiously waiting nearby. The girl slowly regains consciousness, struggling helplessly, a cold pair of eyes watching from the corner. Is there still a human being beneath the smooth, featureless curves of that mask? After her identity was taken, somewhere along the way, in the depths of her loneliness and sorrow, did she lose her humanity as well? Having thwarted the intrusion, confident in the efficacy of the specimen awaiting him in the operating room, undoubtedly, his abilities as a surgeon and intellectual as well, the professor returns to the entrance of the lab, only to be met with strange sounds.
Christian, lâchez ça. Lâchez ça.
barking of his captive dogs, which usually sound muffled and far off, draw near and near. Down the shadowy hall spawns an echoey reckoning, deserving of only one recipient. The keeper of the many prisoners locked away in the bowels of his home and his mind. Panicked, he tries to run, but the dogs quickly converge and overpower him, ripping off his face and putting an end to his life. After witnessing and being culpable to countless horrors, Christian was the one that brought liberation, freeing the captive animals, the young girl, and ending the lives of the people that, in the end, were trying to save her, producing a terrible, precise reaction equal to their own horrific deeds. When she rejected them and their ways and began to walk her own path, collapse was all but inevitable. With her father and Louise now dead, Christian's fate could be sealed. She may never have a new identity and return to society, to a life where finding connection, a way to feel seen and heard, to feel whole, wouldn't be so impossible. As she walks away into the night, she is faced with a daunting choice. Find a way to live as nothing more than a faceless apparition, hiding in the pitch-black shadows where no one dares to pay any attention, or end her suffering the way she said she would throughout the film. Will she have the strength to go on, completely alone? Is there a way?
Bra det där du gjorde mot Conny. Han behövde det.
Tycker du?
Ja. Men det kommer väl på träningen ikväll.
Vad ska du med pinnen till? Jag ska slå dig. Om du försöker.
Har grisen plötsligt blivit modig? Jag åker fram till dig och puttar ner dig. Du kommer inte göra någonting.
Oskar. Tycker du om mig?
Ja, jättemycket.
Magistern kommer ju bli helt galen.
Då ska han bara stå där, eller?
Om jag inte hade varit en flicka, hade du tyckt om mig ändå?
Ja, det hade jag väl. Varför frågar du det?
What can prolonged loneliness drive a person to do exactly? It probably depends on the individual, but in general, the great amount of stress that one can experience can drive them to what they may feel is the brink of their sanity.
Skrik då! Skrik då!
Cabin fever, solitary confinement, having no genuine relationships, losing contact with a lover, being bullied. Social isolation can push a person to both mental and physical extremes, their long-term health suspended in the balance. In such a state, one must do whatever they can to escape. So, when you're cornered, when your back is against the wall, you have to defend yourself. Though, Oscar's act of aggression may just end up making things worse. His enemies are incapacitated now, but they could eventually regroup and close in around him. What will he do then? What is at the end of this road that he has chosen? Is he confident in his ability to keep fighting them off if they come back? Or will he take up the offer that was given to him?
Vi ska ha en liten tävling nu.
Desperation, his deep longing for his loneliness to be over, has brought Oscar here, to a point of no return. What does Ellie mean exactly by saying she's not a girl? Who is she, and who is her father? Is he her father at all? Where does he go at night? Instead of allowing her to come closer and closer, if Oscar finds out the full scope of the atrocities that surround her, will he start to have second thoughts? Will he realize that to be with Ellie is to irreversibly attach himself to a wave of horror that will follow her wherever she goes?
Men du behöver ju bara sticka dig i fingret.
While she has more or less appeared to Oscar as a 12-year-old girl, her true self is beginning to come to light, and he will see her for what she truly is, a bloodthirsty monster. Something inhuman. Her existence an act of violence rippling through the towns and neighborhoods unfortunate enough to be caught in her wake. Is that something that Oscar is truly willing to do? To give up any hope of innocence, a chance at a normal life for someone or something he does not fully know or comprehend?
Jag dödar inte folk.
Nej. Men du skulle vilja. Om du kunde. För att hämnas. Eller hur? Oskar, jag gör det för att jag måste.
Ett öga för ett öra, va? Okej?
Bli mig lite.
The people we walk by on the street, the people we know at work, maybe even our friends or our family, the relationships and interactions we think we share with them, could be nothing more than illusory, a lie they tell every day about who they really are, appearing to us as appealing, approachable, friendly, the love of our lives, the answer to all of our problems, but only let us see what they want us to see, and are, in secret, something truly horrifying.
Du måste ha smittat mig. Jag vill inte leva.
Does Oscar know what he is letting in? Perhaps living out the rest of your days in an empty house, completely alone, would be preferable over being near the presence of some. Now, in the aftermath, After everything that he has been through, Oscar's antagonizers are gone. His problems are now resolved, and his life has transitioned into a relatively good state. He is free to be with Ellie at last. Between the two outcomes, however, which one is more desirable? If Ellie truly loves Oscar, she will turn him into what she is, so they can be together. And if not, she will force him into a life of servitude, to carry out horrific act after horrific act until he is dead. It may be possible that Christian's fate is not so final or damning, that there are some kinds of relationships, depending on where they come from and how they start, that aren't worth pursuing, no matter how we feel. Ultimately, despite the various external factors that impact the course of a life, it is the individual that decides the outcome. The choices we make, the people we spend time with, and for how long, are all encompassed within the sphere of our control at one point or another. Hopefully, those choices culminate into something good. When we are in certain distressing situations, though, it may be difficult not to let heightened feelings dictate our behavior, leading us to do something frantic and potentially harmful. When we let these emotions lead us, we relinquish the control we have over ourselves, weakening our boundaries, making us an easy target to those with malicious designs who, more than anything, will leave us wishing that we could have it back. In order to avoid having our lives be dictated by our most basic fears and desires, we must be able to understand the impact our choices have on the world and ourselves, even if we are bullied, without a face, or feel lower and more cut off than anyone has before. There will always be other people that will want to take advantage and seize control, but the only things they can take are what we give them. After all, if we do not allow them in, they cannot enter.
Du måste bjuda in mig.
Vad händer om jag inte gör det? Finns det något här?